Live from a bunker in the heart of the Ozarks comes your podcast about pop culture and about so many other things in pop culture. It's SiftPop.
We've already got a full house.
I gotta admit, I wasn't ready for that. I was not ready to go live.
What?
I got caught off guard.
Yeah, you did.
Sorry.
We've already got a full house on chat.
Uh-huh.
And before we go live, you can't press the heart button on Mixler. So we're all realizing this, or at least I am for the first time.
Waiting.
Yeah, and
in
so
anticipation.
Then it was like, okay, who's going to give the first heart? And
nice.
I said that I was going to give the first heart, and I did, but I kind of feel bad because I knew when we went live. I was so ready. Everybody else
Cheater.
is just waiting, and I'm like, yeah, here it comes.
Cheater. Well, you ready to shoe a dough?
I am ready to shoe a dough.
All right. For SiftPop today, we're going to be talking Steve Jobs, the movie, and then Blindspot, not Blindside. That is a football movie. So Blindspot is the name of the TV show that we'll be chatting about, NBC show, a little bit. And then joining us this week as our special guest is our good friend John from Joglio. What's up, man?
Hello, everyone. How are you? I don't know what you were mentioning, the hearts and the Mixler, but it sounded exciting, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's fun. We have a chat room because we're live for our podcast. The system that we use to broadcast is an app called Mixler, a website called Mixler. And so we have people join us. Yeah, people are hanging out with us right now.
Yep, chatting away. So we're going to chat about Steve Jobs and as well as Blindside. Before we get into that, though, a blind spot, that is going to happen so many times.
I keep getting, if it's any consolation, Aaron, I keep getting it mixed up with the Blacklist, and I've been switching them back and forth and calling it black. I've been calling them Black Spot, and it's like, that's definitely not anything.
We should just call it The Blind.
Yeah,
just condense it down.
The Tattoo Girl Show.
There you
Let's
go.
just call it that.
There you go.
So we are going to be chatting that, but before we get into that, I do have to say, big old happy anniversary to John, who's joining us today.
Oh, thank you.
Happy anniversary. How many years, ma'am?
4 married and 11 together.
Oh, nice.
It's actually the same date. We made sure it was the same date for both.
That's cool.
Well, that keeps it simple.
It does. That was entirely my idea. I did not want to have to remember 2 different dates from our first date and our actual, when we put the rings on and all that. So
that's sweet. That's actually really sweet and smart. I made mine to where it rhymed so I wouldn't forget, and I still forget. 11-7, Danae. It rhymes.
11-7. Yours is coming up too,
you're
then.
Coming up in a couple weeks, then.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
How many will that be for you?
I have no idea. I think we're at 5, maybe 6. I don't know.
Okay. Cool.
It's good enough.
Yeah.
Danae plays the typical male role in their remembering dates in their relationship. Mm-hmm. She doesn't remember them,
and I don't feel bad about it.
And she doesn't feel bad about it at all.
Thank God I
think that is sort of the sexist exception in our culture, is that
right.
The women sort of get away with hoo, I don't remember. It's like, but if we forget,
I don't know.
We're in the doghouse.
Well, see, I try to give as much grace as my husband gives to me. So if he forgets something, I really don't care. Hey, as long as we're getting along, life is good. I'm good. I'm gold.
Yeah, I do remember that it was awkward. I was there one time when Danae forgot, and Justin was just like, babe, it's not okay. You don't buy me flowers anymore. It's just...
You are a liar. You are a liar. He does find it entertaining to some degree that I forget his birthday all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But now I remember it. Now it's drilled into my memory.
Very
because
nice.
I use it for our code for our systems.
Oh.
It's part of it. It's not the only.
I was going to say.
It's part of a sequence now. And that way I have it drilled in.
If you've been working to crack the code, you've been given a clue.
3 numbers.
The rest of it is tattooed on Danae somewhere.
I have to say, I know we're going to talk about Steve Jobs real quick.
Yeah.
But I am so excited to talk about this new show.
Good. Well, we'll get there. Let's do Steve Jobs
So we're
first.
only going to give you 2 minutes to talk about Steve Jobs, Aaron.
No. There's way more than that to talk about here. Plus, I'm sure you guys have questions. Here's a little bit of the trailer.
What if the computer was a beautiful object? Something you want to look at and have in your home? And what if, instead of it being in the right hands, it was in everyone's hands?
We'd be talking about the most tectonic shift in the status quo since...
Ever.
Your Apple stock is worth $441 million. And your daughter and her mother are on welfare.
She's not my daughter!
You must be able to see that she looks like you.
We will know soon enough if you were Leonardo da Vinci or just think you are.
You're the only one who sees the world the same way I do.
No one sees the world the same way you do.
No one.
So wait a second. I haven't really listened to this, and I haven't paid attention to the trailers, which is no surprise. That's one of my things. I try to keep a clean, palette for this stuff. Does he have a kid?
Yeah.
And he was saying he didn't have a kid?
Correct. That is a huge part of this Steve Jobs story, especially this movie. It is the central part of this movie.
But it is his kid.
Just so we're clear, Danae and I have not seen this yet.
Oh,
yes.
right. Of course.
we should say that. I am the only one of the three who did get a chance to screen it, and
it did just come out like 12 hours ago.
That is correct. Technically, it came out a couple weeks ago, but that was only limited theaters, like New York, LA, that kind of stuff.
Like we live in those markets. I'm in New Hampshire.
That's right.
We'll get into the daughter thing again here in a second, but there is a question already in the chat. Is it an Aaron Sorkin movie?
It is an Aaron Sorkin movie, and that's where I wanted to start.
Okay, well, let's start with the BDG because that's his question.
Okay, yes, this is a Sorkin. Sorkin wrote this movie. In a lot, I think, of whether or not you will enjoy the dialogue and the cadence and all those kind of things will be determined on how you feel about Aaron Sorkin. If you love him, like I do, I love the way he writes. This is one of his best. I loved the dialogue in this, and these characters are given such fun and creative and inventive things to say and ways to say it, and it's just the thing about Sorkin is nobody talks like his characters in the real world, but you wish they did,
Right.
And man, just to live in that space with these people, I really, really liked.
I just went and looked because I have no idea who that guy is, this Sorkin person. And then I see A Few Good Men, The Social Network, and The West Wing, which I know many, many people really loved the show, The West Wing.
One of my favorites.
I always hear good things about A Few Good Men, and I think that's the one where it's like you can't handle the truth.
Yep,
is that right?
That's right.
So
well done. And he also, one of my favorite recent shows that he wrote all of was Newsroom, which kind of got mixed reviews. I loved Newsroom, again, because I love Sorkin and I love the way he writes.
Newsroom was interesting in that I think at its best, it was one of the best shows on television, but sort of it had a lot of middling, sort of mediocre episodes as well. But when it was at its peak, it was really, really solid. And just watching the trailer for Steve Jobs and seeing Jeff Daniels sort of sputter out that Aaron Sorkin cadence you mentioned, that pitter patter punchline, I was like, this feels exactly like Will McAvoy all over again, except now he's just playing whoever he's playing in this film. I forget
He's playing the former CEO of Pepsi who became I think he was head of marketing at Pepsi and became the CEO of Apple and ended up having the head-to-head with Steve Jobs and ended up getting Steve Jobs fired from Apple. So that's his role. And his character is a little bit different than the character he plays in Newsroom. But yeah, he has such a great way with Sorkin. There are just certain actors that I think really get, how to do Sorkin. And I must say, I was impressed with all of them. If you want to talk a second about the acting, Kate Winslet is phenomenal in this.
Is she ever not, though, to be fair?
To be fair, no. I mean, she's always good. Michael Fassbender is Steve Jobs. I mean, it's just he does such a great job with it. Seth Rogen, I've not been a Seth Rogen apologist like a lot of people have. I really liked him as Steve Wozniak in this. I thought he did a really good job.
AKA the bearded guy.
That is right.
Now, here's a question for you, Aaron, because again, I'm going into this as more of a listener than a reviewer because I haven't seen it yet, but I was excited to at some point check it out when I get the chance, especially given its sort of release window and the people involved. What are your predictions on Oscar season for this? Is this going to get some nominations in the writing or acting categories?
I think it might win Best Adapted Screenplay.
I was going to say, like, Aaron Sorkin has a way of almost, regardless of what he does, he puts a stamp on it that's so unique and yet sort of that familiar thing that everyone loves about his style. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Social Network won the Oscar for adapted screenplay.
I believe it did.
Is it any like a coincidence that Social Network, about one of our modern day technological, idols, I guess you could say, that he was involved in that one and involved in this one? Did he do such a good job in that one that they wanted to bring him back in for Steve Jobs?
I mean, I think the fact that it's tech could just be a little bit of coincidence in some ways. I think it's just that it's a good story, and they knew it would fit kind of his style to be able to tell it in that way.
Question about it being a good story, though, because we just had a Steve Jobs like a little while ago.
Yeah, Ashton Kutcher.
Yeah, what was it not a great story then, and they just needed to do it again?
They're called twin films. I looked this up recently.
They happen.
Movies like we had Volcano and Deep Impact.
Right.
We had Hercules and The Legend of Hercules.
Yes.
We had Armageddon and
Deep Impact.
I meant Volcano and Dante's Peak.
Right, exactly. Yep.
But yeah, we always get like two of a kind, it seems, within a year of each other.
We had Bug's Life and Ants were the same year.
Red Planet and Mission to Mars were like 6 months apart. So I feel like this is, more birds of a feather with these two films. It was probably the same spec script that got shopped around, and Aaron probably gravitated towards it because this is a movie a lot like his other projects. It's just a bunch of talking heads. It's people in rooms arguing with each other, and it's difficult to make that sort of action interesting and exciting. But Sorkin has a way with his words that even if it's just people in a dark room yelling at each other for 20 minutes, it's a really captivating motion picture, especially with A Few Good Men, which is just all legalese for like the last 45 minutes of that film.
Yeah.
But he makes it work.
Yeah, and he makes this work too, and it is pretty much just people talking to each other, having conversations at different points. And I want to talk about the structure of this movie too, because it's one of the highlights of the film. But what were we just talking about? There was something that we had brushed on that I wanted to go further into.
Maybe it'll come back to you.
All right, let's go into the structure then, because you mentioned that. This movie takes place in 3 days. It's basically 3 real-time scenes, and they are the 3 product launches that Steve Jobs was a part of. So the structure of the film is such that these 5 people in his life, Steve Wozniak, the Kate Winslet's character, who's like his executive assistant, Jeff Daniels' character, who is his CEO/former CEO, and a couple others, a reporter and one other. He has a conversation with each of them in each of these 3 days. And in those conversations, you get to know everything you need to know about their characters, their relationships, what the movie wants to tell you about his growth. And it's just a really interesting way to tell a story in 3 real-time segments.
That
does sound pretty.
I don't know that I've ever heard of it done like that.
Yeah, it is clever and fascinating, and I know what it was. You had asked about Oscar season, and we never really got
to go back to that
to kind of finish that thought. But yeah, and that is one of the reasons actually to bridge that in, that I feel like it will get a lot of attention, not just for screenplay, but I think you might see it nominated for Best Picture. And I think the acting performances were certainly good enough if it gains momentum to be nominated as well.
And the Academy seems to gravitate towards actors who do portrayals of real-life characters. I think last year we had, as we always do, 5 nominees for Best Actor, and Michael Keaton was the only person playing a fictional character.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like Michael Fassbender has a better-than-average shot of being nominated, if he's as good as you suggested.
I think it's up there in a year where there's not a lot of movies. There's not kind of like a front runner that's getting a ton of buzz. I think Spotlight is starting to take a little bit of that front runner status, which is the movie that's coming out about the investigation into the Catholic Church. And
I haven't heard anything about this, but that sounds interesting.
Yeah, and it's got Michael Keaton and the Incredible Hulk. The actor that plays the Incredible Hulk.
Mark Ruffalo?
Yeah, Mark Ruffalo. A bunch of those guys in it. Liev Schreiber, and that's getting a little bit of buzz as well. But I think Steve Jobs will probably be up there. For sure.
It'll be interesting to see how it shakes out.
Of course, if it were me, I'm still pushing for Inside Out. Still the best movie I've seen this year. So
it's right up there for me. I think I might have liked The Martian more. I think I had more fun with that.
Mm-hmm.
And because we actually talked Inside Out here on SiftPop when I was on a few months back.
That's right.
That is definitely like 1-2 for me, though. That and Mad Max Fury Road. Those are probably easily my top 3 of the year so far.
Good.
But I don't watch nearly as many movies as you do. You see 3 or 4 a week. I see maybe 3 or 4 months.
Oh, feel blessed. Be blessed, my friend. This weekend. So yesterday I saw Steve Jobs. Then today I've got The Last Witch Hunter and Gem and the Holograms. And
yeah,
then,
see, I don't want to see them.
Neither do I. Neither do I. And then I've got 2 more after that. There are 5 new releases out this weekend. So it's just like, why did I tell everybody I'd watch everything again? Why did that happen?
Because you had a lapse in judgment.
Right? Yet you have like a deal with the studio, with the theater, and they let you in for free, right?
That is correct. Yeah.
All right. Well, I could maybe stomach it if I didn't have to pay $9 every time.
Oh my goodness, I can't imagine having to pay for every movie. That would make my job a lot more difficult. Well,
yes,
expensive.
Expensive.
I would just not. I would do what I do now, which is I wouldn't do it. It's not. I wouldn't pay $9 to see The Last Witch Hunter. It doesn't matter like what I was doing for a living. I don't care if I was a professional critic or not. Yeah. I'm just not going to do it.
Question about the Oscars coming up in the chat. Do you think that Gem and the Holograms is total Oscar bait? This is a good question. It's a good question.
I do not think so.
I find that question totally outrageous.
Yeah.
Eventually, I had pegged the Snowden film as what seemed like really obvious Oscar bait. The upcoming biopic on Edward Snowden, starring the very prolific Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Mm-hmm. But that apparently got pushed back to March. So I no longer know what's going on with that film, because it seemed like an obvious sort of biopic, current events, really hot actor, and they pushed it away until spring. So I feel like Steve Jobs might be the Academy really, really likes movies, biopics, period pieces, especially on current or past figures of any sort of celebrity status.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why last year we had Alan Turing and Stephen Hawking biopics. Both got really heavy buzz and nominations. And Eddie Redmayne, of course, won for doing
That's
Stephen
true.
Hawking.
I think. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say there's a really cool moment in Steve Jobs that deals with Alan Turing, and I really appreciate that, especially after having seen one of my favorite movies of last year that dealt with him. So,
The Theory of Everything.
No, that was Stephen Hawking. Turing was.
I'm sorry, I got mixed up.
Yeah, I'm just having trouble remembering the name. But anyways, loved that movie.
So one of the last questions I have, since I didn't get to see this movie, is do you think that I would enjoy it? Because I think like when I see a movie like this, it's like Steve Jobs, meh. You know, mm-hmm. I just don't. But as you're describing it, how the film is put together is what you go for, not just because, you know, Steve Jobs isn't like a pull for me. I guess I think it's like, oh, that's supposed to be the pull, is that it's Steve Jobs. But hearing about, you know, that he might have a kid and it's in 3 parts and all this stuff, that's more interesting to me. I wish that would be the stuff that they would maybe put at the forefront over it being Steve Jobs.
Sure.
But that's just me.
Here's my thing. I think you would feel that meh with if you ever saw the Ashton Kutcher Steve Jobs. I actually liked it. I actually thought it was okay. I thought Kutcher did fine. Mm-hmm. But it's a very typical.
This one's better, though.
It's a very typical, you know,
storytelling
experience. Okay. This one is head and shoulders better than that one because it's so creative, it's so interesting. The acting is at another level. And more than anything, the reason I would say yes, you would love this movie is how clever and intelligent the dialogue is.
I love clever, intelligent dialogue.
I know. The way these people talk and the way they talk to each other and the metaphors they use.
If I go see this, like, I wonder how our radio and our podcast would be affected. Like, we would both be trying to communicate
in
Sorkinese. Like, we would attempt to do a show.
I tried that very briefly with my wife while we were watching The West Wing, and it was very difficult to keep up.
No, it has to be
always
written.
Always walking, always talking.
Always walking, always talking,
There's
always thinking.
No such thing as impromptu Sorkin. That would be almost impossible to pull off. I think overall, there's a lot to love in this movie for most people. And I think it was enjoyable and funny and humorous. Since I haven't talked any negatives yet, let me throw out just a couple things that did take a couple points away from me. One is because of the structure, the character, especially Steve Jobs' character, feels a bit underdeveloped. It feels very well developed in the ways it wants to be, but you don't get a more rounded picture because you're only seeing him on 3 days of his life. Does that make sense? So there's not as much, you know, backstory, time to get into who Steve Jobs was. I mean, they address it in these conversations.
I think that that's good, though, because we already know so much about this guy.
True. No,
He's so much part of our current culture. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
And it does also emphasize the other, and these are just slight negatives. The other slight negative is with the structure. It also does emphasize how made up a lot of this is. There's no way all of these conversations happened on these 3 days. Do you know what I mean?
So obviously not.
So you get a sense of how creative they're being with the truth here. You know, that this is really more of a metaphorical play about true people and true events.
Something Sorkin mentioned in a recent interview, which I really liked, it was a great analogy, is that his screenplays are more like paintings than they are photographs. So they're sort of an artistic representation of a real event, but they're not meant to be sort of completely 100% accurate and photorealistic.
That's good.
I thought it was a perfect analogy for the way he sort of writes.
In this one, you may even compare it more to even like an abstract. You know, where it's even more that way because of the way it's set up. You get a sense very early on that this is impressionistic, if nothing else, rather than literalistic. So
cool.
I think I just made up a word, literalistic.
Good job.
Because I think literal would have just been fine.
Good job. Good job.
Any other questions before we move on?
I've been watching the chat, so I haven't seen anything pop up in the chat, and I'll keep watching that while you ask.
The one question I have, Aaron, is whether or not this will appeal to Apple fanboys and those who don't necessarily love Apple products. Is it for everybody, or will Apple fanboys get more out of it?
I'm very glad you asked that question. I think it addresses, you would think in a movie like this that stuff would be periphery, right? But it's not. It's actually a part of the core of this movie is addressing his theories and the movie very specifically addresses his view that technology should be a closed system. And you see that in Apple's products, not letting people in to mess around with them, everything, all the software coming from Apple, all that kind of stuff. And his disagreement with Steve Wozniak about that, because Woz wanted to be more of an open thing, is a central part of kind of the movie and his successes and failures, in a lot of ways. And because of that, I think Apple fanboys and Apple haters, both, fangirls alike,
thank you,
will actually have a lot of things they'll like about those conversations about, that's why I love Apple. Or in my case, I'm watching it going, that's why I don't get into Apple, because I can't customize anything. That whole thing is there. So, tech people I think will enjoy it even on a different level, but I don't think you have to be a tech head to enjoy it.
I like that Spartanite67 in the chat mentions that he prefers Skynet. I too welcome our cybernetic overlords.
Nice.
Well, that was a good answer. Thank you, Aaron. I think that totally sort of answers what I was wondering about it.
I think one of the things I keep hearing about this movie and Steve Jobs as a character is that he had a particular vision. He was confident in his vision. And sometimes he sacrificed relationships to get to that vision. And sometimes he sacrificed other people's ideas of what they could. And honestly, as an entrepreneur myself, and as somebody who has collaborated on ideas with people too, there does have to be somebody at the top with that particular vision leading the way. And at some point, you have to say, no, that's just not the way that this is going. And you have to say no to people. And you do have to break up relationships. So I was listening to you talking about that kind of, even on a radio show today, about, that kind of juxtaposition of Steve Jobs, the business guy, and also the one that has to sacrifice, in ways, relationships. And I think that that's a brave thing to do. It's an important thing to do. If you're an entrepreneur or a business owner, you have to make calls sometimes that other people aren't going to get.
And part of the thematics of the movie, and you see this in his relationship with, again, Steve Wozniak, is that, yes, that's true, but you don't have to be a jerk when you do it. And Steve Wozniak has a line, and I don't think it's giving too much away. I think it actually is in the trailer. He says, it's not binary. You can be gifted and still be a good person.
Right.
And, that Steve Jobs had this idea that he was gifted so he didn't have to be a good person, And so there's kind of that tug and pull of, sure, make the hard choices, but you can be nice, too.
Don't be a jerk.
Yeah, exactly. So cool. I think there's that element of it as well.
Well, that was a fun chat.
Yeah.
How was it for you not having anybody that's seen the movie? Was it weird?
No, I mean it changes the dynamic, right?
Did it make you
I
feel
become
superior?
the fount of information, you know.
Well,
so
don't go all Steve Jobs and get a big head over there, man.
Well, before we pivot to the next segment, though,
sure.
Aaron, do you have a final score for us?
Yeah, I gave it an A-.
Wow.
All right. That is a solid recommendation.
Yeah,
I will
absolutely.
See this movie now.
I absolutely had a great time, and only just a couple little minor things to notch it down to an A-. But it's great stuff. And again, performances, the score is beautiful too. It's got a tech feel to it, but it's not, overly 8-bit in any way. So it feels really nice. And I actually don't remember who did the score. So, but they did a great job.
Good job, person that did the score. Is that listed on IMDb? 'Cause
Probably.
I'm on there.
Probably.
Daniel Pemberton.
Oh, I don't know much of Pemberton's stuff.
Oh, Pemberton.
Oh, Pemberton.
There are some last names that I immediately wish I had.
Speaking of score, and we'll transition into the next thing after I once again...
yeah, let's transition because I want to talk about Blindspot.
I know you do, but I want to once again pimp Inside Out. I watched Inside Out for the 4th time the other day.
Did you really already 4 times?
Yeah, that score is
it's beautiful.
Unbelievably evocative and beautiful and memorable. I mean, as soon as it starts, it's just like... and that's Michael Giacchino, I think, who does a lot of the Pixar stuff. But
Giacchino is fantastic.
Yeah, Giacchino, yes, thank you.
The other one that I really loved this year is, and I'm guessing you've seen it because you've seen everything, is Alan Silvestri's work on The Walk, which I also thought was really, really beautiful.
Yeah.
And I hope both of those get nominations in February.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Danae, before we head on to Blind Spot.
That is correct, sir. Blind Spot.
Talk a little bit about our live show coming up.
So November 20th here in Springfield, Missouri, we are going to be doing a live broadcast. This is going to be kind of like a variety show with Aaron, Danae, and friends. We are going to have live music. We're going to be doing our podcast in front of a live audience. And we have a great signed group called Nate and the Saints. They're signed with Curb Records. They're going to be closing out the show. We are going to be broadcasting on Mixlr the entire time. It's going to be about a 2-hour-long show, so you can tune in. Our podcast portion is going to be from 6:30 to 7:30. We'll be posting more about this online. If you've got any questions, you can always reach out and chat with us about that. But we are going to be actually doing the whole entire thing for you, and we're trying to figure out if we can do video. That's going to be really fun. And one of the coolest things, too, I mean, it's all amazing. I know you're super excited, I can tell, is that we also have giveaways that we're able to do because we're being sponsored throughout the night by different organizations. In fact, we just got a shipment of 4 FedEx Express boxes packed with giveaways. So we're going to have some really cool band swag to give away and other
Band
fun
is the
things.
communications app that we use to stay in touch with our fans, and we hope you check it out. But they sent us some selfie sticks and some... What are these called?
Those are water bottles, Aaron.
Water bottles. Yep.
Yeah, that is a water bottle. I'm glad I could help.
And what is this thing called? A pen? Something like that?
So if you're not in the area and you can't make it, we're going to do our very best to make sure that you're a part of it, whether it's on Mixlr or video or all of the above. We are going to make it available as an extra feature on podcast. It's Friday, November 20th. It'll be from 6 to 8 p.m. Central. We're still going to be doing our regular show, our regular SiftPop show, so it's not going to interrupt what we normally do, but it'll be kind of a cool bonus thing happening that evening.
Yeah, we'll probably do this, like we're doing right now, the live SiftPop on Friday afternoon, and then as soon as we're done, we'll pack up here and head over to the live venue and start getting loaded in and set up for the live show. So it's going to be a crazy fun day. It's
the first time we've done a show with a live audience in the room. Even radio. I mean, we've had guests come in and various things like that, but we've never had a room full of people. So we're hoping to pack it out. Again, it's at Classic Rock Coffee in Springfield, Missouri, November 20th from 6 to 8 p.m. And it is totally free.
All right. Excited for that day.
Good luck with that.
Thanks.
Guys. That sounds like a lot of fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a blast. Speaking of a blast, let's talk about Blindspot.
Okay, first of all, can I just start? I don't think the show is a blast in the slightest.
You're not a fan of the show, huh?
I am not a fan of this show, but I've watched every episode sort of, what's the phrase? Sort of reluctantly or sort of out of spite.
Hate watching.
You hate watching?
I really am. I'm hate watching.
I hate watch a few shows too. I can totally relate. Maybe that's
Sure.
where we should start is are we liking it so far?
Yeah, let's
I'm 4
talk in general.
episodes in.
I am also 4 episodes in, and I am right down the middle right now. For me, there are parts of it. I'll go into specifics here in a little bit. Danae, go ahead. What do you think?
I am in the middle and towards. I just in episode 4 started to shift towards. I'm not sure I'm gonna like this. I've been kind of like, ooh, this is fun. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah, interesting. I'm concerned. So I've kind of had a step down series, and
yes.
Thank you for bringing it up in the chat. We do not do any spoilers, so we're not going to be spoiling anything for you as we talk about it. This is kind of just our general thoughts. So
yeah,
no worries there.
I understand that feeling as well. I feel like, John, we should start with you. You've got a very vehement reaction. So tell us a little bit how quickly you hated it and why you hate it.
I think I knew I didn't like the show within 10 minutes, just from the overly simplified exposition. And the one thing I think that describes why I don't like this show the most, out of all the pilots I picked up this season, Blindspot is my least favorite because it's familiar. It feels like the entire show was written by someone who has no experience with FBI, law enforcement, or the real world, but had just binge-watched a bunch of action movies and police procedurals. Everything in this show we've seen before in better places. The whole amnesia with a secret agent, that was the Bourne Identity. The person who has a bunch of tattoos, clues on their back, that was done better with Wentworth Miller in Prison Break. And this Kurt Weller character is just like a poor man's version of Jack Bauer, except he's dumber and generally like a bigger muscle head. And I feel like everything about the show is just like pieces and elements borrowed from other better movies. Episode 5, which you haven't got to yet, has a hostage standoff in a bank. And it's like, this feels exactly like Inside Man. It feels like The Bank Job. It feels like any other movie where hostages take, bank robbers take hostages inside of a building. And everything about it, the way they negotiate, the way they set up the shots and cinematography, it just feels so familiar. And I haven't seen a single moment from this show that, to me, signaled that this was original or unique in any way. But for what it is, if you had never watched a single moment of any movie or TV show prior, it's pretty all right.
I wonder if, because I think it's doing well in the ratings, and I think they picked it up already for the full season. I wonder if that's why, because for us, we talk about familiar things as if that's negative. Oh, I've seen this before. For a lot of people, familiar is good. It feels good that something's familiar. It feels, like I've been here before. I don't have to worry. I know what this is, and I can watch it. So I wonder if that's why it's doing well, is because it's so familiar.
I think that could have a lot to do with it, because people are sort of afraid to try new things and to try different shows. And this is just sort of, all right, we have like the hot female who has like the secret set of skills. We have the gruff guy who's partnered with her and they're at each other's throats at the beginning. Uneasy allies who have to fight a new criminal of the week every episode. And they stop the bad guys with secret clues. And it's the same sort of formula that we've had on The Mentalist and Sherlock and Elementary and now Limitless.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of like every show that just pairs, the sort of savant character with the by the books cop. They team up together in an uneasy relationship and solve crimes every week. That's basically the formula for every show on TV right now. And Blindspot to me seems like the worst execution of that sort of familiar framework.
I'm not as disappointed in it, I guess.
I don't think disappointment's the right word. It's just it's sort of I don't know that it's either. I don't dislike it, but there's like nothing about it that compels me to be interested either. That makes sense.
The way you're talking to me sounds like when something will catch me in a movie, and then the rest of the movie, I roll my eyes every time it happens. So it's like I'm
roll my eyes. That is exactly the right phrase. Like, this is a show I'm like, oh, did you really just do that? In episode 5, which I think I just watched, you guys said you haven't seen yet, there's a conversation where the FBI butts heads with the CIA. Like the two groups of people are stuck in a room and they're arguing with each other. And the Keller character, I forget the actor's name, he literally explains at one point to the other agents in the room, oh, the FBI is domestic, the CIA is international. That means, and then as if that wasn't like dumbed down and pointless enough, he then continues to say, that means the CIA has no jurisdiction here in America. It's like, oh, okay, great. I appreciate you explaining what the CIA does to the CIA. Like, there's something about the show that just seems so sort of idiotic, for lack of a better word.
But
like
they're doing so much. Like each episode, so I'm going to compare it to something kind of similar, but not really. I mean, like we're talking about this being such like so many other television shows. Let's take something like Castle's coming up in the chat. Let's just talk about that for a second.
Castle.
If you're watching Castle, it is a B, C, D, E kind of a thing, right? And it's pretty. You've got one precinct.
You know the recipe.
But it's all kind of happening in one world. There's not really a lot of diversity going on. Blindspot has all these different agencies going on. You've got, to us, the audience, a brand new group of people coming together that are, solving crime we're meeting them for the first time, but they've known each other for a long time. So we're kind of playing catch up with their relationship as they're telling us information about these characters. Then you've got this chick that shows up out of nowhere and she's trying to figure everything out. So there's a lot more going on, a lot more people, a lot more organizations, a lot more sites. And we're like taken around the city in a different way because, each episode there's all these different places that are being visited. So this is a big budget in a way. You're like watching it going, wow, that was just an explosion scene. And now we're seeing all these cars exploded and, like things like that. So it is interesting in that way because there's more going on, but maybe for those who are used to peeling back the surface of these types of shows, there's not a lot underneath it. I would say I'm enjoying it more. My concerns that I have is my Alias concern, right?
Yeah, right.
Which is what?
Which is how long are they going to make this go?
Right.
So
and we saw that in Prison Break too. It's like you can only keep that up for so long.
So the thing that's tying this together is her mysterious tattoos. So far, they haven't let them fail. We're not seeing failure on their part. The only failure we're seeing is that maybe they're not solving something or she's not able to talk to somebody long enough to find out who she is. Those are the failures. But they're like preventing pretty major national world crisis on every episode. Mm-hmm. It's not small. It's huge.
That's another issue I have as well, where the suspension of disbelief that every one of her tattoos leads to a yet crime.
Exactly, like, and that's the Alias thing, right? Where
it's been 5 or 6 weeks now, and like they're still catching crimes before they happen.
But not just
clairvoyant were these tattoo artists,
and not just regular, not just regular crimes, but like major government conspiracy things. Like if you really are conceptually trying to figure this puzzle out on your own, this has got to be drilled down to like there's one person who's a mastermind over all of the world and somehow they got this girl and they tattooed her or they sent her out just to have fun. Like it doesn't go anywhere. Superficially, maybe you can have fun for a few episodes, but once you dig in, they are doing something interesting though, and I did want to talk about this, and it does happen in other shows too, maybe more now than before. They're moving some of the plot line super fast.
I wanted to talk about that, actually. That was one of my
kind
points.
Of appreciate that.
I did too. That's one of the things I like about how quickly she finds out who she is.
Yes.
I was really surprised that happened in episode 4. I was expecting that to be dragged out like the whole season.
I know, and that's the fun part too. Is that it's like, oh, that's already solved, or oh, that's already, or a character shows up you think is important. Oh, they're already out of this show, like so. And we're only a little bit in, so that to me says they're brave in some ways, and hopefully making really brave, smart moves in other ways to keep this going. Because if this series is going to make it for those of us who, like to be more engaged in certain ways, hopefully the mysteries of her tattoos will not only make more sense, quote unquote, realistically. And what I mean by that is that there's not a way, it's not like tattoos labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You've got to figure them out in this order to get to the mystery. There's no way that they're going to figure out. They have to let them fail at some point in time. There's no way that they're going to figure out the tattoo and then get to the person 2 hours before this such and such happens. It's just that would make me insane. So they have.
I think the show definitely has a lot of promise and a lot of potential if they sort of play their cards right and develop it in a way that doesn't seem so cookie cutter. And I think right now it definitely seems like the heir apparent to the 24 series this seems more action oriented and more exciting than like your average Law and Order episode. So I am enjoying the action and the gunplay and like the fist to fist takedowns and stuff in this show. And it's the overall plot about the amnesia and the sort of Navy SEAL aspect that's interesting. But like the sort of criminal of the week that takes up 38 minutes of the 44-minute show, that's where I'm sort of like, all right, this feels too familiar. It seems too predictable. And it's the same thing we already saw last week. I think if they can sort of break that mold and focus more on the characters, I think it'll be really interesting. And that's something that I've seen Blacklist do this season as well in season 3, where I did not like Blacklist in season 1 because it felt so familiar. It was just they brought in this really cool premise, but they sidelined it for 90% of the episode just to say, here's a bad guy, we're going to catch him. Now we've caught him, next episode. But now in season 3, they've sort of developed the universe, and the show focuses more on that B plot where we follow around like the weird lives and the secrets of these characters. And I think if Blindspot can sort of turn that corner, it'll be a really fun show.
There's one difference. Blindspot doesn't have James Spader.
Yes. No, and that is a very, very key point, Aaron, because the guy who plays Keller, I am not convinced that he is a good actor at all.
Yeah.
Like every line is just, he's sort of, so Jane, you got to come with me to this warehouse. We can't let you have a gun, though. So stay here. All right. Like everything. He's just not a good actor. He just really isn't. I'm sorry.
He's not the worst actor that I'm watching right now. The worst actor that I'm seeing right now in my, like...
Oh, I'm so excited.
Like my TV watching to see kind of how things are going is Jeff Gordon's guy from Gotham. That guy is awful. I am sorry. I can't... I've never seen somebody on television.
Commissioner Gordon?
Yes.
I think
it's bad.
They're very similar, actually. They kind of have that same... there's a nonchalance and a gruffness to their performance. That is,
and a lack of sort of complexity and a lack of depth. It's just very sort of one note.
Jim Gordon.
Yeah. You said Jeff Gordon, which is the race car driver,
right,
but
yes.
that's
Thank
fine.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's what I. That's why you're here.
You two both agree that this main guy in Blindspot is not really fantastic. He's not terribly convincing.
It hasn't tweaked me in the way that it's tweaked you, but you saying it, I agree.
I can see what you're saying. Yeah.
It just hasn't stood out to me the way it has to you.
There was a moment in the first episode, which I liked the first episode because there was so much intrigue and curiosity going on.
Sure.
And I think some of the cinematography and the camera angles and things like that, those are really interesting too and captivating in their own way. You know, they've got like the big emotional score going on, and so they're really pulling all the stops, you know, like, hey, look over here, we've got a cool thing going on. There was a moment in that in the pilot where she reaches out and she touches him, like touches his face. She's trying to kind of remember who she is. I thought that was I liked that part. It was really intriguing because you don't know enough about him. You don't know anything about her. She doesn't know anything about herself either. But there was something going on there in him, and you could tell. I even wrote it down in my notes. I was like, that was like palatable. Something is there. And then there's more that kind of develops in the next couple of episodes where we kind of do learn that there's something that he is really attracted to, and something that there's more to that story. There's depth to those two characters that you aren't expecting. But, you know, again, my concern is no matter how good the writing is or whatever, and you want all that stuff to work for itself. But one of my major concerns is I'm going to go back to Alias for just a second because I kind of wanted to flesh that out just a teeny bit more.
Sure.
So in Alias, it kind of felt like towards the end, they had built up this whole Rambaldi thing, you know, and they just kept like making stuff up as they went instead of having a plan. And I hope that they're not doing that with Blindspot, but it has that feel to it. They're just throwing out so many different, like, you can trust this person, you can't trust this person. You know, here's this person's storyline. Oh, but there's also like this deep intrigue, and here there's this, and then there's a little bit of that too. And it's just so much that you almost can't keep it all in your head, which is cool in a way and concerning in a way.
Oh, I totally agree.
It's almost like when you cast it's almost like if the storyline is a braid and it starts up here at the top and starts to braid itself together, and then there's like an anchor down below, and that's kind of like maybe the end of the season, and then it braids itself down below, and that's the end of the next season, and so forth and so forth. That works really, really well, unless all of a sudden it starts to come completely undone and starts to fray and get all tangled, and then doesn't make any sense at all, and it takes the entire series, and it just ruins
it's the
something
Lost
that had
effect. You know, a lot of people had that problem with Lost. They didn't feel like it tied everything, braided everything up like it should have. So, and I think there's part of that too with the tattoo thing that I love. Part of the tattoo thing is really, really fun, right? Like the way the puzzle part of my brain works when I watch the show, I go, oh, I like that cipher aspect to it or whatever. I like that. But then there's this other part of me that's like, this should be, and I said this about Prison Break too, it should be an anthology series, or it should be just like a one and done series, because something like this needs to tell a complete story. And I don't get the feeling that they're going to be able to do that, which is kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I lost you guys for a minute there, but I agree with the last sentence I heard from Aaron.
Superficially, her tattoos are cool looking.
That's fair point.
Superficially.
Fair point.
She's beautiful to look at. I love her eyes. She's got these amazing eyes. There was one episode.
I think she's going to be certainly the breakout star of the show.
Yeah.
I've been impressed so far with. I don't know any of the actors' names yet. It's early. I will say though, the head of the department, the FBI, their like chief, the black lady. She the same actress who played the Carmen Sandiego like chief. Because she seems very similar.
Carmen Sandiego.
I think she's played that role in a few things. I think was she the one in The Shield?
She was in like RoboCop from 2014.
I just want her once to say, "Go out and get him, Gumshoe," like just one time.
Of note, little random side note: the Jane Doe is her name in this show. Her name is Jamie Alexander, and she was in Thor.
Yep.
That's where that's where I recognized her from. I knew I recognized her from somewhere.
Ashley Johnson is really great as well as the little lab tech. I think she I remember her as the little girl in Growing Pains.
Yes. Yep.
She doesn't have a lot to work with, but she makes her little scenes
she's quirky and
somewhat
fun.
Interesting. She
yeah.
gives a little bit of like warmth and humor to sort of the dry, sort of clue-breaking exposition.
She's bringing something to the table.
So, 9 out of 10 times, do you find now that if you don't recognize an actor and actress from something, when you finally do realize it, it's from the Marvel Universe?
That's funny.
There's a lot of actors.
That is a lot of people in that universe now.
It's funny, we were my husband and I were watching Blindspot last night, and Ashley Johnson came up, and he was like, "Oh, she looks so familiar," and I was like, "Yeah, I think that's." Like, I'm seeing her as a child. So, went to IMDb and then found out who she was. And I was like, yes, that's exactly how I know her. I found the pictures. And Justin was like, no, it was something else.
The daughter, What Women Want.
Nope. He was
the voice of The Last of Us.
She was like the reporter or something in just like a real quick cameo on a like Spider-Man or something recently.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, she just had like a little.
Once again,
the Avengers. It was the Avengers,
the Marvel Universe.
Yeah,
of course.
He was like, "That's who she is." I was like, "No, she's the girl from." All right, whatever.
I don't know. Maybe you guys have one final thing as well before we move on to our buried treasure. I'm going to do for my one final thing, and no pressure if you don't have another thing to say. This movie has
TV show.
This show. Sorry, I'm so used to talking about movies.
I know.
This show has, in many ways, followed the trend of being more graphic violently, I thought. Like, there's a lot more spatter than a lot of these types of shows will have. You mentioned The Blacklist. That's that way, too, is willing to be more realistic with the violence. And for a show that seems so procedural and like, so many of the others, it's interesting that it chooses to do that. Just something I noticed.
I'll piggyback off of that and say I noticed it. There's an explosion at one point in time. And a lot of times in TV shows, they'll cut to commercial. Right at that moment, there's a big explosion.
Or cut to a reaction.
Yeah, they'll cut to something. They'll cut away. And this show does sit inside of that moment which I kind of found to be interesting because it was so different. I hadn't really followed through into that before. And so now we're like, okay, we just had an explosion. We're not cutting away from it. Oh, we're seeing what it's like to recover from it. And they change the sound, the audio changes. So you kind of feel like you're in that space. And so I would agree with you. This is, it's a violent show. It goes some dark places.
John, you got one more thing?
My final thought is the show had better get interesting in the next 2 episodes, or else I'm going to drop it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like to give every show like, a half season, like a 6-episode run. And I'm doing the same with Minority Report and Limitless and Quantico. And so far, the latter 2 are impressing me way more than the first 2. Minority Report and Blindspot don't seem very interesting outside of that one little sort of premise in the pilot that they all but abandoned as soon as it serves the plot. Like the thing with the tattoos and the amnesia, it's interesting, but as soon as they sort of get their clue, it just completely turns into a regular like, catch the bad guy.
Right.
Whereas I feel like Quantico and Limitless are doing a little bit more with those familiar formulas, and I'm more inclined, I think, to keep watching those 2.
I'm glad that you're liking Limitless. I'm liking Limitless as well.
So are we.
It's fun. I think that's the big difference. Is it's funny.
Yeah.
And I really like the characters. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, he's a lot.
And I loved the movie too.
And the fact that it plays so closely with the movie, that Bradley Cooper's in it. I mean, that's
I think that was a really, really nice touch to sort of make it a proper sequel in the same universe.
Yeah.
Whereas Minority Report, which is the clear sort of parallel because it's also based on a sci-fi film, it is a sequel to that same universe, but like everything involving Tom Cruise is like never mentioned ever, and I feel like maybe if they had some allusion, some connection with it, it might make the show a little bit stronger, at least on the pilot, but they decided just to create an entirely new world, but that sort of coexists with what was established in the Steven Spielberg film.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
I do have to say, since we've kind of poo-pooed on it a little bit, I don't feel bad saying this. In the 4th episode, there's a fight scene between people who are wearing suits, and like they're like hazmat suits. One of them is yellow, one of them is white. It was so ridiculous at that point that Justin, my husband, and I were laughing because we were like, it's banana versus the marshmallow. And like we were doing commentary the whole time. It made it super ridiculous. So I recommend maybe just going back and watching that scene. And
like
then
it reminded you of like the sumo suits that you'll see at like carnivals or fairs or whatever. Like trying to knock each other off. That's hilarious.
I think sarcastic commentary is one of the few ways my wife and I get through half of the things.
There you go.
That's the best. I mean, that's the best part of hate watching, right? Is
hate watching indeed.
Absolutely.
People do that stuff.
We like to finish up our SiftPop episodes with a little bit of buried treasure. This is something that just one thing that's going on in pop culture world, whether it's movie, TVs, apps, something tech that we want to bring to your attention that maybe you don't know about. Aaron, do you want to start?
Sure. I've got an app that one of my sons asked me about, and as a conscientious father, I want to be able to know what they're downloading on their phone, and so they have to ask permission whenever they get an app. And it was a game called Adventure Capitalist, and basically
I'm already interested.
And in researching this game, I fell head over heels in love with it. Like, and here's the thing about it. It is just a click buttons game. There is very little, there's no, like, you have to click in certain places. It's just you start a lemonade stand, and then when you sell a lemon, you have to push the button to sell another lemon, and you keep selling lemons until you can buy a newspaper stand. And then you buy a newspaper stand, and you start selling newspapers and lemons. And then if you make enough money doing that, you can hire a manager, so you don't have to keep pushing the lemon button. So then your manager will just keep selling those lemons for you. You don't have to worry about that one anymore. And then it goes to, a car wash, and then a pizza delivery service, and then a donut shop, and a shrimp factory, and a hockey team, and a movie studio, and a bank, and an oil field. I didn't do that by memory. I have it in front of me. So it goes,
I am literally already downloading it.
Okay, but we have to pause for just a second. So this game was something where I was like, oh, I'm curious, about this game. I would delete this off of my phone maybe 15 seconds into it because it was
doesn't appeal to you at all.
From my personality, doesn't appeal to me at all because it is like The interface is really interesting. It's like a list. It's just a list of information. And then as as it goes on, there's more to kind of look at, but not really. You're not really going into different environments. You're basically just watching your bank account get bigger and bigger. And you're trying to...
That's something I do every day. What are you talking about?
And you're trying to, get bonuses for your lemonade stand when you get to 100 lemonade stands. And you're also trying to attract investors. And I'm just like, whatever. But Aaron, totally obsessed.
Yeah. And
so maybe personality-wise, not for everybody.
Yeah, and I think it appeals to if you have a math brain or an efficiency brain, because you're trying to figure out, which do I need to build more of, and which do I need to, hire a new manager for, and which do I need to do bonuses for. And so, you're thinking how to make the most money. So, right now I have, $406 trillion in the bank, and I'm trying to decide, do I buy more oil rigs because I'm getting my best rate of return on those, or do I buy more lemonade stands because if I get to another level, I'll get a ×3 multiplier? And
so this is in the chat. People are saying, "Thank you, I didn't know I needed this." And brought up was this is an updated version of a lemonade stand from the old Apple. Is it LLE days? I think I might
Apple II.
Apple II
days. I think it's just a typo. Apple II.
Okay. So this might have a lot of
it's got a little history to it.
Yeah. So,
and we bring it all back around to Steve Jobs, which is always fun too. By the way, Apple II is such a huge part of this movie in some really powerful and emotional ways. I just wanted to throw that out since somebody brought up Apple II.
Cool.
So I too wanted to chat about an app. So similar to the one that Aaron is bringing up, not something that every personality type would be interested in. This is an RPG game where you're going on adventures. It's called Raid Brigade, and I've been playing it for a little over a week now, and it's by Ultrabit and Congregate. In fact, Congregate also created the Adventure Capitalist.
Or at least they own it, yeah.
So there's like a forum that you can log into, and you can get bonus points and stuff like that. So Raid Brigade is basically you're a character in a team, and you tap the screen to shoot your arrows or to wave your sword around. And it's very I love the interface on it. A lot of times on these games, you have to keep your hands or your fingers like at a specific place. If you're going to be moving around in your environment, you have to keep your thumb on the lower left hand, and that's your left and right or whatever, and then your jump is on the lower right. This one is really intelligent. You can use the entire screen to kind of move around throughout your universe, and so you just drag your finger around and you go around in one environment from point A to point B. You're trying to get to the castle and defeat all of your foes along the way. Good job. Now do it again for level 2, and then it goes up and up and up and up. It is a compact game though, so this is. I thought that it was going to be kind of simple, I'm an archer. I'm wielding a weapon, or whatever. This is way more complex. You can update your characters. You can update all of your gear. You don't just go from level 1 to level 100 or whatever. You also can battle people who are online and go against their bases, which means you have a base, which means you have to upgrade your base. So there's a lot of things that can happen inside this game. So it's also, based on gathering resources, so you have to kind of go in and gather those every once in a while. It totally sucked me in though, so I play it.
It's like a world building game,
kind of. Yeah, you just have your keep, so you have different people in your team that you're building up, so you're leveling up these characters, and those characters are guarding your base also. So you're taking them out on raids, and they're guarding your base. So it's a very interesting game. It's really simple if you know RPG games. If you don't know RPG games, it's a little overwhelming because there's stuff all over your interface.
Yeah, I find RPGs to be a little bit much.
So very different from the Adventure Capitalists, where you just have one screen to look at. You've got all these numbers
flying.
Push
the buttons when they're ready to push.
And not this one. This one you have, easily 15 things that you can click on. So
there you go.
That one's called Raid Brigade.
What about you, John? What's your buried treasure?
My buried treasure this week is going to be the Back to the Future trilogy, and specifically Back to the Future Day yesterday.
That was so much fun.
2 days ago, Wednesday, October 21st, 2015. I don't know how you guys celebrated it, but Back to the Future has always been my absolute favorite movie ever. And I had basically been waiting for 4:29 p.m. October 21st, 2015 since I first saw Back to the Future 2.
Wow.
Let's say 1992 or 3. Like when I was a kid, over 20 years ago, I've been waiting for this. and I had the opportunity to marathon the entire trilogy at the cinema, which was the first time I had ever seen parts 2 or 3 on the big screen with a completely packed theater.
Oh, that's fun.
It was such a new and different experience for movies I'd already seen 15 or 20 times. To now see them again with a big crowd and get all the laughter and the applause and the cheering at all the right moments was such a different and such a fun experience. And people were dressing up. The local news crew was there. They had props and memorabilia from the film on display out in the lobby. It was just like a really cool night, and to sort of experience those films for the last time they're ever going to take place in the future. Because as of today, the entire Back to the Future trilogy takes place in the past, which is sort of mind blowing.
Did you cry?
No, I didn't cry, but I definitely cheered. I was applauding, and it was such a fun experience to see that sort of finally come full circle with the future that they had predicted, 30 years ago.
Yeah. I don't know if you can see in the chat, but there's other people who are talking about that they also did, the marathon. And Caleb mentioned that there was a guy who brought the DeLorean by. He actually posted a picture of it in our SiftPop group on Band if you want to see it. So,
yeah, no, I've actually had a chance to sit down behind the wheel of, I think, 4 or 5 DeLoreans, 2 or 3 of which were tricked out to look like the Time Machine.
That's awesome.
They make appearances at a lot of the local conventions around my neck of the woods, Rhode Island Comic-Con, Super Mega Fest. I think I might have saw one of them at PAX East a couple years back. Just if there's ever like a big convention in town, like someone will show up with a DeLorean and charge you $5 to sit inside it and take pictures. And I usually am more than willing to help out, especially since most of the time the money goes to Parkinson's research and stuff like that. So,
did you see their appearance on Jimmy Kimmel?
I did.
Did you get a chance?
I liked it, but at the same time, it sort of makes me a little sad because of how old Chris is and how sort of I'm trying to find the right word to describe Michael's sort of state of health now. But it is a bit depressing to see these once virile and exciting 2 individuals that they're really getting long in the tooth now. And I kind of feel bad we keep dragging them out for every anniversary, having them put on the jumpsuit and the leather and the the life preserver vest all over again. But at the same time, it's always great to see these 2, and it's clear they're still having fun with the property. And so I enjoyed the skit. I think it would have made a better pre-tape, because when they do it live, you could tell that they were waiting for large pockets of applause. It looked like Chris forgot some of his lines. I think if they had pre-taped that, it would have been a little tighter and more funny, but I liked it a lot.
I don't know. That applause was emotional.
It was.
It was. I think that I really liked that too, that they got a chance to really sort of sit there and bask in what was like a good 2-minute standing ovation.
Yeah.
It was a pretty solid chunk of applause for them, and well deserved. The fact that we're still talking about this sci-fi comedy from 30 years ago is incredible.
And I love how many companies made the future come true. I saw USA Today did a version of the newspaper. You know, Pepsi did the Pepsi bottle. The shoes are now being made.
Different cities were releasing that they pulled people out, pulled over the DeLorean, and it was really a pop culture moment. I'm glad that you brought that up, because this being our pop culture podcast, it's the first time I've really noted that the entire country seemed to get caught up in something.
I was really surprised by that, because for the last 5 years, and I'm sure you've seen some of it, people keep posting on Facebook, like, today is the day Marty arrives in the future. And I was like, no, it's not. Have you guys ever seen the movie? And like, as a diehard fan, it always annoyed me when people would pull these like so-called hoaxes and like try to claim like this is the day in the future. And I was sort of like, doesn't anyone know that it's actually October 21st? So when October 21st finally showed up and literally everyone knew about it, I was like, awesome. It isn't just a thing for the nerds. Like, everyone was getting in on this. The Today Show did like an entire hour devoted to the Back to the Future trilogy. They had on the original cast. They had DeLoreans and all that stuff in the plaza by the 30 Rock. And like, everybody on social media was talking about it. So it was really great to see like a global event around what I thought would be just sort of an inside joke for some of the more diehard fans.
And even an investment from companies like Pepsi, who are,
right, absolutely.
Yeah, they're taking their own resources that could be spent elsewhere, and they're using them to create new brands just to commensurate this movie. So I felt like, I don't know if we're going to see this again, in a movie format. I wonder what the next one will be. But I was really caught up in just how much of pop culture. I'm hugely disappointed in baseball for not just giving the Cubs the win. That really bothers me because I feel like that was the biggest failure we have.
The Mets should have given him one game.
They should have given him all
Especially
of them.
on Back to the Future Day. How can they get eliminated on Back to the Future Day?
It was so frustrating.
I felt like that was just sort of serendipitous, and it speaks volumes to the Cubbies curse. The fact that even when it has been prophesized by Bob Gale 24 years earlier, they still can't get it done.
Oh, it's so hard.
I feel for the Chicago faithful. I really do.
Oh, we all do.
We all do.
Well, I feel for all of us. Because it's done.
Aww.
The hour is up. If my calculations are correct, we are arriving at the end of this episode.
Thank you so much for joining us for another live recording of the podcast SiftPop with Aaron and Danae. As always, we are joined by the Critic, the Geek, and the Girl. Critic being Aaron. Geek today was John Paula of Jogwheel.
Oh.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And I'm the girl.
Yes, you are.
It's just as simple as that.
Before we head out, another reminder that you can support what we do at patreon.com/Aaron and Danae. Even $1 every month will help us do what we do. And a huge thank you to the BDG, who is now a supporter at Patreon. We appreciate that, man. It means a lot to us, and we are looking forward to getting to that next hurdle and doing another day every week.
We're hopefully going to have some fun announcements about our next podcast release. We'll keep you guys updated. You can check out the SiftPop Podcast feed at iTunes and Stitcher. We do sometimes release other podcast episodes like spoilers and things like that there. So there's bonus material if you subscribe to SiftPop. Again, that's at iTunes and Stitcher. And always, 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 links are at our website, aaronanddanae.com. Guys, have a good weekend. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
And remember, it's possible to be both gifted and a good person.
Thanks, Steve Jobs.